All right, so today's topic is who cares about hybrid clouds, and hopefully by the end of it, not just us. So I'd like to welcome today David Davis. So David's been around quite a while. I remember some of those training videos at David's site that actually are very handy. If you've never used those, I definitely invite you to do that. Before we get started on full introductions, I'm going to pull David here in a second. I'd like to point everybody's attention to the GoToWebinar interface there. So there's questions that you can ask, and we ask that you ask questions. So as we go through the presentation, I'll be checking on questions, and I'll also be asking the ones that are relevant to the conversation. And if we don't get to your questions, because frequently we have so many, that we'll get back with you. We have everyone's contact information and actually your questions, so we'll be able to get back to you. So David, let's pull you in here and talk about your new initiative, the virtualization software website, and any other thing you'd like to bring in.
Yeah, Shannon, thanks so much for having me on today. It's exciting to be on the Master of Disaster, webinar series you guys have been doing for a while. You guys have got a lot of great, content about disaster recovery and so forth when it comes to disaster recovery planning. So I followed the series off and on over the time, and it's good to be on. So a little bit about me, my bio's up there. As Shannon mentioned, I got started creating training videos back around 2007 or so, I guess it was, and went to VMworld for the first time in 2008, and started, trying to promote some of the training I'd created, and have really been just doing video training like that ever since, and writing and blogging, and it's a topic that I feel, very passionate about, virtualization and cloud, and how, the data center is changing. So, more recently, I've started a new blog with Scott D. Lowe, the other Scott Lowe, and it's virtualizationsoftware.com. We even have another blog called enterprisestorageguide.com. So, really trying to hit on and keep up to date and educate people around, the changing data center, especially, virtualization and storage. And, it's great to be on.
We're glad to have you. As you said, it's a changing world, and it's, I've got my blog site listed down there too. And when I started, I thought, well, virtualization is where it's at, and it has been for years. And as we'll see in this webinar, even that the virtualization's actually created a whole lot of a new industry as far as not just how you look at it, but new capabilities that you just didn't have before. So we're going to get into that today. And so we're going to start with the whole idea around hybrid cloud. It's as Wikipedia says, and everybody knows it's correct. So it's hybrid cloud is the composition of private cloud. So if we define a private cloud, it could be just your enterprise. And then some connectivity to community or public or managed cloud. And I think for us, we're going to be looking at the bound together piece of this. They're distinct entities, but they're bound together where you have options. You have multiple deployment models where you're able to accomplish things that you weren't able to previously. It's simply because the world is caught up to being able to accommodate it. So let's jump into this slide. And Dave, I know when we were talking about this one, there were several things that jumped out at us. And what are some of the things that you saw that interested you in this particular slide?
Well, I think my eye immediately went to the right, and I saw that 70% of enterprises will pursue hybrid cloud by 2015. And I focused in on the word pursue right there, kind of trying to quantify that in my head, like what does pursue mean actually? But
right.
I mean, I guess before I got into that, I noticed immediately 70% of enterprises are interested in cloud, and I think that's pretty relevant and interesting, just on its own.
Yeah, and I think to some degree what it indicates is the state of the what's available. So I think if we were in the early 1900s, it would have been the automobile industry. You're able to do things that you weren't just a few years ago with a horse and buggy, certainly. And so now you've got these different vendors, and let's move over to this one. So you've got these different vendors with their own solutions, and they're coming at it from their approach of hybrid cloud, and then we've got VMware, Microsoft, Cisco, and HP on there. And I saw today, David, I don't know if you saw this one or not, but there was an article that came across today that HP is spending like $1 billion on their cloud initiative. What's your thoughts on that level of spending for cloud?
That's incredible. I mean, to be honest, I hate to sound naive, but before this webinar, before we start talking, I didn't even know that HP had a cloud solution. So,
well, yeah, that's a marketing problem, right?
Right.
I think we're both in the same boat. I think they've had, some knocks as far as not having clear vision on it, but they're HP, so they can certainly correct that quickly, as with Microsoft, Cisco, and VMware too. Now, I see a commonality between all these. Do you see the same thing I do, David?
Well, at least in the top two, I mean, I see three blobs, three clouds. In most of them, that's kind of how it is. It's three things, connected together. And I think the important thing that I've learned over the years by looking, relatively deeply into VMware's offering and Microsoft's offering especially, is that just because there's three blobs there and it says hybrid cloud, doesn't mean that they work the same at all. They can be very different once you get into these. But what is it that you see?
Well, I see that they're all trying to approach the issue with a very similar looking nature. They've got hybrid between there, but what's dictating their model is that both ends of the model are their products. So it requires that I can do hybrid, but I've also got to be able to do hybrid in the respect that both ends are VMware, both ends are Microsoft, that type of thing. So there's hybrid, but then there's also, it's a hybrid between two dissimilar data centers as opposed to necessarily opposed to hybrid. I want to connect two very different things. So that would be one observation.
Yeah, you make a great point. I mean, all of these, of course, they have the vendor name and logo on the top, and so this is hybrid cloud from that vendor's perspective. And of course, it's like you said, it's all their products, their solutions on each side. And so to me, that kind of begs the question, like, why can't you have just a cloud and all these different vendors, be in one, and everybody, work together in, and this happy cloud utopia.
Well, there you go. You described it, utopia, and that's the challenge of making it true hybrid, is getting away from the utopia. So we see these different infrastructures, and we'll start with that the different infrastructures idea. Let's take inside a data center, for example. You can even have different infrastructures inside the data center. Maybe you've got some departments running Hyper-V, OpenStack initiative going on in there in VMware. So when you compound that with, now I want to go to some use of service like Amazon or Azure, then I'm compounding, these different infrastructures. They just keep spreading, even outside my walls, to where the idea of a hybrid in this scenario gets a lot more tough, and that's where, you know, a lot of our partner ecosystem, fortunately, are all VMware shops. So you see those managed clouds, and those are our partners listed over there, and they're running the VMware stack, and they're having great success at that VMware building block. You know, that vision that they have is being achieved. And then, as we'll talk about later, you know, we'll have more online with more capabilities coming up. But even though they're giving you this, you know, this choice, there's still limitations to that choice. You're playing in their individual worlds, I think, more than ideally what you described as utopia. We're getting there. It's the start of something, but there's certainly some elements missing that we'll talk about a bit later in the webinar about what we identify as some, you know, real challenges with this. So as you see this choice, you know, cloud, David, and your utopia, what other things would you feel like a hybrid cloud would be good to have, as far as if I need more choice or would like more choices? What are some elements you'd like to see in there?
Well, I think, you know, most companies, like when I go around and speak at the VMware user groups, you know, I usually ask the question towards the start of my presentation, you know, what percentage virtualized are you? And, you know, most of the, you know, companies out there are around, you know, 50% virtualized or so. Some have very high, you know, virtualization, you know, ratios, but others, you know, are still, they're barely getting started, you know, in many cases. So I think, you know, the reality at most companies is, you know, they have one hypervisor and they're just trying to, you know, still consolidate, you know, their virtual machines with that. So they haven't even gotten to the true definition, you know, of a private cloud.
So they would be the 30% in that survey ahead, as opposed to 70 if they're looking at hybrid. It seems like.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, to me, that's not all bad. You know, those companies could still be interested in a hybrid cloud because maybe, you know, they see it as a solution for their, you know, virtualization, you know, challenges. Maybe moving some of their workload to a cloud provider, you know, would offload some of the stress that they're under, you know, to provide the infrastructure and the storage and everything. So, you know, that's not, you know, a completely bad position to be in, and they can still leverage, you know, I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it points out to the monolithic nature, even though it's virtual sometimes, that, you know, it frees you in a lot of ways, but there are still limitations to, if I'm looking at this slide going, I'd really like to go, you know, I'd like to have something, a little bit of everything here. So I can do that, but it's much more difficult to do from a manageability point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not like a menu at a restaurant where you can, you know, order a la carte, you know, all these different solutions. They're all very different. I mean, if you perhaps, you know, had VMware and you went to a VMware, you know, cloud provider and you used the cloud connector and, you know, you used all these solutions defined exactly by VMware, you know, maybe, things might work out, you know, as planned. But no, you know, you're not going to be able to have VMware, you know, Hyper-V OpenStack and use Azure and Amazon Web Services, you know, and everything like that in order kind of a la carte as most people would like to have the flexibility and the freedom to do. I mean, you know, I have looked at, you know, for example, a solution that helps you, you know, to move virtual machines into Amazon Web Services from VMware, but it's not, but it's, I mean, Amazon Web Services, you know, has a completely different virtual machine format, and their naming, you know, their nomenclature, you know, that they use for everything compared to VMware is different. So there's a pretty steep learning curve just to, you know, understand even how AWS works for the typical VMware admin.
Yeah, it's bottom-up type of knowledge that you need. as opposed to what problem is it you're trying to solve. I need to figure out what you're saying. I need to know what the names of these things are. What am I trying to do with this? I know what I'm trying to do, but what do you call it, and how do you do it, type thing. And I think that what we're hitting on is a use case. One of the things we want to do is be able to use these different things for different reasons. So I've got test dev, I've got backup and DR, or if I just want some sort of, it could be disposable, type of elasticity, then these are different use cases where a true hybrid cloud would be nice. As far as, what if I want to test dev just to be private? Yet I want backup and disaster recovery. I want somebody that knows what they're doing, so I'm going to go to someone that does that all the time. And then with elasticity and mobility, I want to look toward, like you said, the Amazon services. But right now, the challenges are that what are the names of these things, and how do I? Now I'm managing times, potentially by times 3 for just different use cases. And if you take it more toward an application, if you look at the types of applications, they'll sort of start, in a way, dictating where they want to live, and then that gets you into more of the situation of, I've got some sort of issue that I want to take this business application. And so, David, let's use this as an example. I'm taking this application, the little folder here, and I want to go to, as you said, Amazon. So what are some of the challenges you see of getting to get that application from, like, VMware? You mentioned some, but let's just recap and go through. Let's take a VMware application and let's go to Amazon. What are some of the core differences of me getting there?
Yeah, absolutely. The first challenge is just simply understanding how they name all their different services, to help you to select which service it is from their, extensive offering, which service it is that you're going to use to run your virtual machine. And then what size of virtual machine, is it that you want to run? And then, how is that, and then what's that going to cost you, I think,
Right.
Because most companies are moving to the cloud, not to pay more, certainly. They want it to be at least cost the same or less. So, what's it going to cost you? And the idea of only paying for what you use, it sounds nice, but what if, it's like a restaurant where you only pay for what you eat, but everything costs, the price of a Kobe steak or something. You don't want to have to do that either.
Yeah.
So
as we looked at this, I want to throw some bullets in here. So now, as you see at the bottom of this left-hand side, it says Zerto. So we've been looking at this problem, and so now we'll start transitioning into, we're talking about the differences, and here's what we see as some of the differences. And you start looking at getting that from point A to point B. You've got two completely different stacks, as you said, Dave. You've got different networks, but you've also got, even deeper than that, just the nomenclature, the learning curve it takes. There's a lot of that. You've got the downtime between getting it from one to the other. And then you've got the issue of, I'm just trying to solve this for maybe one VM right now, just as a stunt, if nothing else. But what if I'm trying to do this with multi-tier application or multi-terabyte data? I think it's fair to say it's not necessarily ready for prime time. Complex management, all the manual steps that are still present. And so building off what you said, these are some of the things we're seeing. And then, of course, if you wanted to take that same thing and maybe take it to managed cloud, that's a whole different set of problems, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely. Depending what hypervisor, what stack, they're using, how they package, their solution, what sort of self-service, front end they have, even just, moving, multi-terabyte data from one, data center to the other, absolutely, a long list of, complexities. I think, a lot of admins, unless they have someone dedicated who understands all these different, cloud solutions, in some cases, developers have ended up running in Amazon Web Services, either because they just did it, as shadow IT secretly, or they did it, maybe the IT manager did it out of spite. Well, you don't like my services? Fine, go to Amazon Web Services. But it's not easy.
No, and in fact, we're talking about dropping these out into some sort of cloud provider. But let's just take the use case of I just want to take it from VMware to Hyper-V, or VMware to let's say VMware to Hyper-V. That's still